Hello! Happy Disability Pride Month! I'm your host, Favorite. I use they, them pronouns. I am so excited for today's video. Today's video, we're going to be talking about being disabled. And I wanted to talk about being disabled because I am, in fact, disabled. So if you want to stick around for that, cool. If you don't, peace out. Anyway, my social medias are all linked down below. If you give me a follow, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Pinterest, link down below and give me a follow. Thank you if you do, and if you don't, that's fine as well. If you're returning, thank you for coming back, and if you're new, welcome to the channel. A disclaimer before I begin. Everything I talk about in this video are my own opinions or what I have learned from other disabled creators. I do not speak for all disabled people. I can only speak for myself and give my own thoughts on the topics being discussed in this video. You are free to have your own opinions as I am allowed to have mine. I do not wish to speak over other disabled people, only spread awareness on disabilities and voice my opinions as a disabled person. Let's get into it. So I'm going to give you two definitions on what it means to be disabled because I want everybody to be on the same page what it means to be disabled. Okay, number one. Disabled, which is an adjective, means of a person having a physical or mental condition that limits movements, senses, or activities. And then the Merriam definition, the meaning of disabled is impaired or limited by a physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental condition. And so that's what it means to be disabled. Now I have some talking points that I have written down that I'm just going to check off as I finish so I don't lose my place. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is the kinds of disabilities because that definition was pretty broad, and if you're confused, I'm going to just explain it a little bit further for you. Okay, there are temporary disabilities, meaning you could get injured and be only disabled for a little while, or you could be a permanent disability, meaning that you will need a mobility aid or whatever you need permanently. There, you can be born disabled, or you can become disabled as you get older. You can have a disability from chronic pain, chronic illnesses, mental disorders like BPD, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, depression. Those can be disabling. You can be disabled from a neurological disorder like autism, ADHD. I'm sure I'm missing other ones. And yeah, so those are the different types of being disabled. I also want to say that with ageism and disabilities, there are babies who are born disabled. There are people who are not disabled until they get in their golden years. You can be disabled and 20. You can be disabled and 30. You can be disabled and 10. Age does not equal disability, meaning you only disabled when you're old. There are children who are disabled, there are teenagers who are disabled, adults who are disabled, and elderly people who are disabled. Age and disability are not synonymous. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can become disabled. Anyone can become disabled, anyone can be disabled, meaning that you can be disabled and not know that you're disabled, but you are disabled. And anyone can become it through injury or being disabled the whole time and just not knowing it and just struggling as time goes on, or struggling more as time goes on. I'm going to talk about being diagnosed and undiagnosed, which is kind of what I'm talking about. You can be undiagnosed disabled, meaning you're undiagnosed with ADHD and autism and didn't know for the longest time, and you are disabled. You were disabled the entire time. You can be diagnosed with a chronic illness or an injury, like you went to the doctor and they was like, oh yeah, you have a spinal injury, and be disabled because of that injury or that thing you were diagnosed with. But one is not more superior than the other one. You can be undiagnosed and be disabled. Like when you become older, you do not get you are disabled now diagnosis. You're not diagnosed with old and disabled. That's just not how it works, and you don't have to give proof that you're disabled. You just are. I'm talking about invisibly disabled. Being invisibly disabled meaning that you don't look disabled. You're too pretty to be disabled. When that's not how things work. You cannot see the back pain that I am in right now, because I'm actually sitting right up and I'm experiencing a lot of pain in my shoulder, between my shoulder blades, and my lower back is always in pain. You don't see that. You can't see that. You cannot see that when I walk up the steps, my knees are screaming at me. You can't see that. A lot of things you cannot see. You cannot see a neurological disorder, autism, ADHD. You cannot see that. This is neurologically. You can see the repercussions of it. Me getting distracted very easily. You can see me in social settings, how awkward I am in social settings. But you don't see the physical representation on my body that I am disabled. That doesn't mean that I'm not disabled. It just means you can't see it. There are a lot of disabilities that you cannot physically see. Now I want to talk about ableism and internalized ableism. Like, you're too pretty to be disabled, or you're not disabled, you're faking it, or you just need to try harder, and all those other comments like that. That's ableism talking. And over time, disabled people internalize that and they tell themselves that, and then that becomes their new norm. Where they're like, I just need to try harder, and then they see another disabled person struggling, and then internalized ableism becomes actual ableism, and they start telling other people that they should be doing that. You should be able to do that. What are you doing? Try harder. I try harder. You should be able to try harder. And so we really need to work on our ableist language and how we communicate with other people and be more understanding of other people and their disabilities. Talk about accessibility and accommodations. Everyone should be able to go everywhere. But a lot of buildings are not accessible to disabled people. Like, there for years, disabled people were not allowed to exist out in society. It was illegal. So a lot of buildings, which are really old buildings, were not built for disabled people. They were not built for disabled people. So disabled people now are allowed to leave their homes, and that's why Disability Pride Month is so important, because we are able to leave our homes and actually exist outside of our homes and actually be seen, because disabilities isn't ugly. We're not flawed. Those are not flaws. Being injured is not a flaw. It's not a character trait that's like, oh, that's so heinous, we can't have that in public. And buildings should have always been accessible to people. They should have always been, disabled people should just be able to exist and be able to go where they want to go and do things they want to do. And they are not harming anyone by existing. They're merely existing. And it's actually pretty dangerous for certain buildings, for any building, not to be accessible to disabled people. Like wheelchair bound people, or people who need mobility aids. And there are two options when you enter a building. There are stairs and there are elevators. If an elevator is broken, disabled people are not able to access that building. If there's a fire, disabled people are not able to leave the building without assistance. That is very troubling and very upsetting, because disabled people should be able to leave when they need to. Because if there's a fire or any kind of emergency like that, you're not allowed to use the elevator. So how is a disabled person supposed to leave the building without the elevator? They can't go down the stairs. So all buildings should be accessible, and we need to be talking more about making buildings accessible to everyone. And accommodations. Everyone should be accommodated for, whether you're diagnosed, undiagnosed, whether you're disabled or not disabled. everyone needs accommodations for something, or accessibility to something. Accommodations could be merely like, you need glasses, you should be accommodated by be able to get glasses to see, because that would help you to be able to see and do the things you need to do. Like, if you are sitting in the back of a classroom and you're really short and there's a lot of tall people in front of you and you can't see the board, you should be accommodated to by moving your seat so that you can see the board and write the information down that you need to be able to write down. Accessibility, accommodations, and a lot of people don't know that there are accommodations that they can ask for while they're working or at school, and a lot of times they're not accessible unless you have a diagnosis. They should be available to everyone who needs it, whether diagnosed or not, because sometimes people go their whole lives undiagnosed with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. There's another one. All of those, they're undiagnosed their entire lives, and always struggled and didn't know why, or if they were the only one doing it, or if everyone struggled but they didn't talk about it, and they need the accommodations, but they're not available because they don't have a diagnosis. That's just completely wrong. They should be able to get the diagnosis and or be able to access accommodations for things that they struggle with. So yeah, that's my thoughts on accommodations. I think they should be also readily available, meaning that you don't have to search the deepest, darkest pit of the internet in order to find like some secret websites that have all the information on the accommodations that you are allowed to ask for. It should be readily available whether you're in college, high school, elementary, you're working, you're living at home. You should be able to get the information you need, the accommodations you need, and the resources should be readily available for you. There's no limit to accessibility or accommodations. There should not be a limit to it. Everyone should be able to get the accommodations they need to survive and thrive. Working with disabilities is my next thing. Again, with accommodations, whether it's like having a chair to sit down every once in a while, because if you've been to grocery stores, cashiers 90,000 times out of 10 are standing up. I've only been to one establishment that allows their cashiers to sit down, and that is Aldi's. Everywhere else, they are forced to stand up the entire time, and that is wrong. I think people should be able to sit down and scan items. I think there should be more breaks and being able to sit down. There should be a chair so that people can sit down. If you're going to be standing in one position for a long period of time, that is painful. I know for me it's painful. Like, me standing up for an hour making dinner is incredibly painful, and I couldn't imagine having to do it for 8+ hours a day without being able to sit down, not once, or being able to sit for like 30 minutes in 8 hours. I think there should be more breaks in throughout the day that people can sit down if their job requires them to stand up for long periods of time. That's just me personally. I also think the hiring process to be more accessible, and the potential interview questions should be readily available so people can practice before they go in for an interview, so they're more likely to get the job. And we should also make it so that because a lot of jobs say that you don't need to have had a job before in order to get a job. We're not going to discriminate against you for that. And then they will hire someone who has experience over a person who doesn't have experience because it's less risk, or whatever the reason they have is, or they just interviewed better. I do not interview very well and have not gotten jobs because I don't interview very well. Someone asked a question, I answered the question, and then they kind of wanted me to elaborate more on the question, and I was like, no, that's it. That's all I have for you. And I was like, oh. And if you answer the question, what else is there to say after that? I don't know. But making it more accessible, like if you have a question that you want someone to elaborate on and giving them the questions beforehand, that would make it a lot easier so they can know this one they want to elaborate on. And if you're saying, well, then everybody can get hired, that's kind of my point. You shouldn't be penalized for needing accommodations as well. You shouldn't be penalized for needing more assistance or accommodations. So the last thing I want to talk about is disabled rights. Actually, before I talk about the last thing, I do want to talk about faking. Did I talk about faking? If I did, I'll just cut this part out. But no one should be faking disorders. I don't support people who do fake disorders, but I am not qualified to tell who is faking disorder and who is not faking disorder. I don't think people should be doing it, but there probably is a reason why they're doing it. Whether they think it's cool because they don't see the negative effects of the disorders people actually struggle with, or because they need attention from their parents or a therapist or a friend, and the internet is where they find they can get attention from. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And I think they should need a better outlet to getting their attention. That's what I want to say on faking disorders. I also want to say that we should not be penalizing people who are disabled because some people are faking disorders. That is the minority. The majority of people are actually disabled and don't owe you proof that they're disabled. And we shouldn't be saying that everyone's faking their disorders. And I don't like people making fun of people who fake disorders. I don't like that because it feels as though they are mocking the disorder to me. I don't think people should be faking it, but I don't think people should be mocking people who do fake it, because it feels like they're saying everyone who has this disorder is faking it. And even if they say they're not making fun of the disability itself, but the person faking the disability, it still feels kind of murky. The water seems kind of murky to me, and I personally don't like that. That's just a personal opinion. You can have your own thoughts on it, and that's cool. But I want to talk about disabled rights and how disabled people don't have many. Again, for the longest time, they weren't allowed to be seen in public. And disabled people can actually lose rights. They lose their bodily autonomy. Like, people can forcibly sterilize, and it's legal to forcibly sterilize or sterilize without the person knowing they're sterilized. Like, disabled people, you can't have children. You cannot have children. I won't let you. And that's a form of eugenics, and I think that's terrible. They can also lose their rights to adopt. I heard someone talking about autistic people. If they're diagnosed autistic, later on in life, they won't be allowed to adopt in certain states. And the whole adoption system is flawed. Private adoptions, sketchy. The amount of trauma children go through in the adoption and the foster care system is astonishing, and a lot of people don't adopt for right reasons, are terrible adoptees or adopters. Whatever one is, like, they adopt the person, the kid. Some people are only want to adopt babies, and there are a lot of children in need of adopting or in fostering and in need of love and care, and aren't getting that because people only want to adopt babies. And even some babies to go through adoption or like foster care, and they go the entire time not being adopted as well, and that's unfortunate. If you want to hear my thoughts on that, comment that down below, because I have like a whole thing that should be done for that, because listening to adopted children and their experiences on TikTok really made me feel really sad and really bad that people treated the children they wanted so terribly. and how traumatic the experience is for them. A lot of times, disabled people lose funding from the government when they get married. So they're no longer funded by the government once they get married, or they are living with a significant other for a long period of time. And that means if they are in a dangerous situation and they cannot leave, they can't leave. If a dangerous situation arises in that relationship, they cannot leave because they don't have the money to leave. They are now forced to stay, and they will choose to stay because at least they're taken care of. At least they don't have to worry about being homeless, because the government has stopped funding them. And I think that's wrong. The government should still fund you because you still need to be able to get certain things, and you shouldn't have to rely on your spouse to do that if you can get funding from the government. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. I had a thought on something else. Oh, I also want to talk about being diagnosed and undiagnosed one more time because I remembered something. Doctors don't know everything. Doctors are not, they're professionals, and yes, they went to school for that, but sometimes they pick a niche and that's their niche, and so anything outside their niche they don't know. There's a lot of biases. There's also a lot of prejudices, whatever you want to call it, that doctors have, where like BIPOC people are not believed when they say they have something, or very little is done towards that. There's also, like with women and AFAB people, very feminine presenting people, that they are often misdiagnosed. And I'm not saying that it's just them who gets misdiagnosed, because I'm sure it's across the board, but I do know that a lot of ADHD, AFAB people were misdiagnosed with BPD or bipolar disorder, something like a mood disorder instead of a neurological disorder like ADHD, and so it took them years to get diagnosed properly. I'm not saying that you can't have a mood disorder and ADHD, because it's comorbidities and stuff, and ADHD, one of the symptoms is unable to regulate your emotions, and it could lead to a mood disorder, but ADHD is from birth, and mood disorder is through living and trying to, I don't know what it is. I'm not a doctor. But yeah, doctors have their own biases and are sometimes reluctant to give a certain diagnosis to people, whether it's because they think autism is such a bad thing, they will not diagnose you with autism. Instead, we're trying to find some other reason that you have the symptoms that you have. And that's unfortunate, and doctors should not be allowed to do that. They should diagnose based on the symptoms and the criteria that is listed. And also, the weird things are happening with the DSM-6, where they're like trying, because people are overdiagnosed with ADHD and autism, they're trying to make it more difficult for people to get diagnosed, which is very harmful, and I don't support that. I think that's terrible. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about all those things. This video might be pretty long, but if you stay to the end, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate you staying to the end. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up if you like. Subscribe if you want to. Hit the bell notifications so you're notified when I upload. I try to upload twice a week. My social medias are all linked in the description box down below, and give me a follow. Comment your favorite disabled creators, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, so that we can support them, and because we need to support our disabled creators out here. And yeah, is there anything else? Oh, you can also, like, if you're gonna comment your favorite disabled creator, you can always talk about the content they kind of create, so that because there's some people have niches, and I understand they have their niches, and you don't go support someone, like follow but don't watch their content because it's not your kind of content. Follow support people that you like their content, but also support disabled people as well. And yeah, so you can leave a comment of the disabled creator you like and the content that you like, and if people see that comment and they're like, oh, that's my niche as well, and they'll go follow and support them, and yay. But yeah, until next time, drink some water, eat a snack, play with a fidget toy, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of Disability Pride Month. Bye!